When is the loneliest moment of your life? I had found her in a box, all alone, behind a mass of people all eager for their chance to hold one of the other puppies. She was smaller, uglier, and sick-looking, which is probably why they kept her out of the main box and hid her in the back. When I approached her box, we looked at each other and knew we had met before. Her tail hit the sides of the box as I leaned down to pick her up and take her home. For 14 years she was my best friend. I honestly can't remember a day we didn't spend together. Parks and car rides were routine. The beach, mountain hikes, swimming and camping trips were our thing. Between all those adventures, the days and nights were filled with laughter, love and her sassy attitude. I never considered she would die before me until I found a tumor on her side. After some time collecting the money, I finally got her into surgery. She was 13, but very healthy, so the operation went without a hitch. The vet warned me that there was always the chance they didn't get all the cancer and it would come back and spread like crazy. But he made it sound like a formality and that I had nothing to worry about. After a few weeks of recovery, we jumped back into our summer and resumed life together. Without her tumor she was like a puppy again. You could see the appreciation in her eyes. A few months later she began eating tons of grass and throwing up every morning, which I knew was unusual. I called the vet who told me it was indigestion issues. So I tried not to worry. Then, one day I found 4 or 5 small lumps on her body. The next day I found more. And more and more. I knew what it was, but couldn't admit it to myself. I kept going like nothing was wrong. Then one night in early September she started to get ill. It seemed like a respiratory infection, not cancer. So I made a vet appointment for a few days away and did my best to make her feel better. By the next day she had stopped eating and going to the bathroom. By that evening she started bleeding out of her bottom and nose. So I picked her up and drove to the emergency vet. It was when I opened the back door to help her out of the car that I understood she was dying. She gave me a look I'd never seen in 14 years. A look of goodbye. I told her no in the most authoritative and stern voice I could muster. "Damn it, Sipa, you're coming home tonight," I said. The vet staff brought out a table, I lifted her onto it and they wheeled her back for examination. I don't know how much time passed, but eventually the vet came into the waiting room, sat down with us and told me and my wife that Sipa was bleeding internally. She asked what we wanted to do. I told the vet anything. Just fix her. To which she replied I could fix her for now, send her home and she will spend the next few days slowly dying. Or we can talk about letting her go tonight, surrounded by people who care, in a humane and giving way. I refused. I wasn't going to accept this bullshit. The vet left us to talk it over. In the middle of my argument to just bring her home, it hit me, I made her a promise. The day before I had laid down with her and promised her I would do the right thing when it came time. I told her I would be with her as far as I could go, and look into her eyes so she knew I was there. So that I would be the last thing she saw. Just then the vet wheeled Sipa into the room and helped her down off the bed. She was so excited to see me. She laid on the floor with her head in my lap and I told her I was sorry. I thanked her for being my friend and making my life better. My wife told the vet our decision and they hooked her up to the floor as I laid next to her, staring into her eyes. Death came fast. And when the last bit of light vanished from her eyes, I felt like it was me who was lost in the dark. Suddenly she was a memory I had and no longer a memory we were making. My world closed in on me until I blacked out. My wife says I punched the dashboard of the car the entire ride home, yelling and screaming and crying. I remember nothing until I stepped out of the car and buckled at the knees. I slapped my wife's hand away from me as she attempted to help me up off the ground. Brushed the rocks and dirt and blood off my knees and sat in the parking lot crying for what felt like a million years. Sleep took over for the next 3 days. When I woke to silence. No sound of paws on the linoleum. No sound of her moving her dish around as she ate, or of the water splashing out, creating a lake on the floor, while she drank. I didn't hear her rushing down the hall to greet me as I stepped out of bed. And she wasn't waiting for me on the couch. I was unsure what to do. For 14 years this was when I put on her leash and took her out to go potty. I stood there, thoughtless, for the time it usually took to take her out. When I finally got myself together and was about to head out for the store, I hesitated. I could hear my neighbors outside. She loved them. It was routine for her to rush out the door and greet them for a dog treat. They loved her too. It was only after a 5-minute-long love session that we could finally get in the car and leave. But instead of a dog rushing outside between my legs, I was going to have to say she was dead out loud for the first time. I opened the door, looked at my neighbor, and tears flooded my eyes. They stood there for a moment, confused and concerned. I opened my mouth to say the words, but no words came out. I could tell that by now they noticed that I wasn't with Sipa. They looked even more confused. I opened my mouth again, and at the same time I could tell that they finally understood. She died a few nights ago. My girl died. That was by far the loneliest moment of my life. Saying those words emptied me out and secluded me for years. It's been almost 6 years since she passed away. I think about her every day. I used to dream about her. Until she came to me to show me that we couldn't be together. But that's a story of its own. Every year I celebrate her death. And it took until a month ago for me to even consider getting another dog. Which I did. An 8-year-old boxer rescue. She's my new best friend and amazing in a million different ways. None of them the same as Sipa, which I'm glad for. I'll never get over that dog. She made life easy to understand. She taught me how to be affectionate and how to find joy in stupid, simple shit. She made me visible to the world. She let me practice my wedding vows on her. She paid attention to my stupid late-night dances I'd do while making a snack. She licked the tears from my face and bossed me around when she wasn't satisfied. She was the best friend I've ever had. Edit, thank you all for the kind words. I just want to say that I wish there were more people who cared about their pets, and animals, like you all do. Live every day you have with them in love and not fear. Thanks for helping to keep Sipa's memory alive.